Welcome into the Bite Meat Podcast. As always, I am John Lopez, and as always, it is brought to you every week by Texas Star Grill Shop. My guy Rick, Michelle, and full guy gang over there at Texas Star Grill Shop. Always good to bring in pit masters from all over the country, all over the world. We've had some from Australia and beyond over the course of this podcast. Really appreciate you guys joining us. A little different look of things today. We talk all kinds of barbecue. We'd like to mix in some various topics. And this is going to be Tex-Mex Barbecue, which is generally you would think, well, everybody does that. But it's kind of funny because you do find some lulls in the market, and we're gonna get with Leroy from Leroy's Tex-Mex Barbecue. I had Troy written down over here for something else.
You can call me whatever you want. Yeah.
But don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We always encourage you to join us on Podbean because you can get every podcast that we've ever made on there, and of course we'll go from there. But Leroy, you heard me kind of setting things up here. Glad that you joined us, first of all. You are Leroy's Tex-Mex is in Fredericksburg, Texas. Very popular, very trendy place for a lot of Texans and from beyond to spend long weekends, vacation, etc. That's a rough market, and I want to get into that as well. But you heard me talking about Tex-Mex Barbecue. And, obviously I'm in Houston. I spent a lot of time in South Texas. And when you talk about some of the influences of Tex-Mex barbecue, et cetera, I'm surprised that there aren't more places that really sort of kind of fuse these things. So I want to start right there. Am I wrong on that? Do people just not do it, or what is your take on that?
I think there's probably more places that even I don't know about, but I think there's more places that you don't know about, or that you know do it that actually do it. Now, you've probably been to a lot of them. You've probably been to more barbecue places than I have. But I focus sometimes what I see on the Tex-Mex side when I see it. But there's a lot of places that really, especially over the last 7, 8, 9 years, have started adding fresh tortillas or birria or some sort of Tex-Mex. They're all, just about all the ones I've seen are more barbecue, but they are starting to add some smoked brisket enchiladas or brisket tacos.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, and or birria, and they're seeing that they're able to, with what they already have, smoke these meats, do these meats, and able to add some Tex-Mex flair to it to give them, something that maybe their customer or their competition down the road doesn't have.
Yeah, and go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is most of the ones I've seen are more barbecue centered with a little bit of Tex-Mex. Most of them they still do brisket by the pound. They do all their meats by the pound. That's one thing we don't do, is we don't do anything by the pound unless we know you or it's a special situation. Really, we just don't have the room for it on our pit. We're working on expansion right now, and when we add another 1,000-gallon pit, we may do a little bit of that on the weekends. But that's tough to make money really doing brisket by the pound unless you're going to charge a whole bunch of money for it. And
yeah,
I don't like doing that either. But
yeah. So the history of Leroy's is interesting. I know it was a family owned. Tell us a little bit about the place itself.
So it's me and my brother and my mom, and really he maybe get him on here sometime, talk more barbecue, cooking and things. And but he's the pit master. Although I designed the menu, and we kind of talked about everything. But he's the one that really has brought a lot of these flavors to life, from what I designed on the menu. But it's me and my brother and my mom.
And their names?
Luke, and then my mom is Jenny.
Okay.
Jenny. Okay. And Jenny, my mom was a waitress at Bluebonnet Cafe in Marble Falls for 35 years.
How about that? We've all been there.
Yeah. The pie, right? The big giant pies. Yeah. And then her grandfather, who really raised her, he had opened one of San Marcos's first Mexican food restaurants down on Cheatham Street during World War II. It was a little house with like 3 tables. Eventually he moved out to what is now I-35. It wasn't back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then his son opened Paul's in San Marcos, which became a pretty popular restaurant in San Marcos.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't necessarily, they did enchiladas, but it was a lot of like chicken fried steak and homestyle food there.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we get our background from. But yeah, we opened in 2022. We decided, started working on it in 2021, opened in 2022.
So Fredericksburg, a lot of it seems like a lot of ladies like to go to Fredericksburg for the weekend, wine and shopping and all that. That had to have been pretty daunting to say, yeah, we're going to open this place and we're going to do it in Fredericksburg with all the competition.
Yeah, a little bit. One thing, I knew I wanted to do something. We knew we wanted to do something. We weren't sure where or when or exactly what it was going to be. I'd been thinking about this Tex-Mex fusion for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And this Tex-Mex barbecue fusion for a long time. And
Right.
kind of through a mutual friend, got hooked up with a peach orchard that he wanted a food truck. And I told him I want to do brick and mortar. And
Mm-hmm.
we talked for a while, and then we kind of came to agreement and ended up him helping me build a building there that I leased from him, that area. And it's kind of a thing that I really have a lifetime lease there. They don't ever want to do food, and they don't ever want me to leave, and they really don't ever want they don't ever want to sell. It's been in their family for 100 years, and they've got 6,000 peach trees, and they do peaches, strawberries, blackberries, all kinds. They're doing tomatoes, wildflowers. So it's really a neat location. I didn't know how it was going to be, how it was going to turn out, but we
Mm-hmm.
started with something. We were going to do it out of this one little log cabin, and that grew to us adding on a restaurant before we opened, or a dining room, 1,000 square foot dining room, and it's become we're busting at the seams. We're working on expanding right now.
That's
We're gonna,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
And
We're fortunate. We're out of town, so we're not paying Main Street rental prices, lease prices.
mm-hmm.
But we still get quite a bit of traffic out on the wine road. We're right in the middle of the 290 wine corridor, where everybody's out there drinking wine and doing things.
No, now we're talking.
Yeah.
And so, the interesting thing about this, and I ask all our pit masters and experts that come on here, is it kind of has to be inside of you. You have to have that passion for it. Where do you think that comes from, in terms of your family and you?
I think my mom, her family, they're passed, and then my brother and me, we both love to cook, and we both, so many people are intimidated by cooking,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess it's like anything else. You just got to get in there and do it and start learning things. And we kind of grew up in the age where Food Network was coming on.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's one of the things that we watch the most on TV. Sit there and watch Food Network, and you may pick up one little thing, a series that you watch.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it was just kind of in our blood, and we're kind of restaurant people. My mom's very outgoing. My brother, he had a restaurant in Marble Falls 20 years ago. It was a Cajun food restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fantastic restaurant, but they were a little younger, and I think they enjoyed having a restaurant more than they enjoyed working in the restaurant. So it's a tough deal. He's a lot different now, and he's been there every day for 3 years, firing the pit up and doing all that. So
Yeah.
that's been a
Well,
big part of our consistency.
that's a good transition to the meat and potatoes, so to speak, no pun intended,
Sure.
of why we're here, and that is Tex-Mex barbecue. How would you define Tex-Mex barbecue? Because you mentioned, and I think this is part of maybe your definition, it's not just a brisket with charro beans on the side. I mean, what is true Tex-Mex barbecue?
I mean, true Tex-Mex barbecue, like we split it right down the middle, where we don't really go too much to one side. Our most traditional barbecue is our sandwiches, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really the only place that our brisket stands on its own, is that sliced brisket sandwich, where
Mm-hmm.
you better have the cut right from a good piece, and it flavored good and all that, because really everything else, we have 6 craft tacos, and it's our different smoked meats. Our brisket's going to have roasted poblano queso on that taco, with some cabbage, lime crema, tomatillo salsa, and a little bit of pico on a homemade from scratch tortilla. And so I think true Tex-Mex is, one of our sides is Spanish rice, charro beans, but we also have potato salad you can choose from, which is a mustard-based
Hmm.
potato salad.
Hmm.
But really the fusion too comes out in a lot of our specials that my brother does.
Yeah.
Smoked brisket verde enchiladas. One of our big menu items that's become wildly popular is our smoked pork belly menudo.
Yeah.
Um, Not traditional menudo because it's pork belly, but we felt like that was going to allow more people to try it that
Hmm.
weren't scared of the cow intestine, the tripe,
Yeah.
especially in a place like Fredericksburg, and
Hmm.
um, and so it's very traditional. Other than we just substitute the pork belly for the tripe, and then you can actually add ramen noodles to it, and it becomes a whole different dish there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, we split it right down the middle, and so we try to incorporate both into everything that we do.
Hmm.
Um, Valentina's Tex-Mex Barbecue was one of the first original OG
Hmm.
Tex-Mex barbecue places, and they leaned more barbecue, but they did a lot of things, homemade tortillas, refried beans, and some different things. Um, but they weren't as Tex-Mex as we are. We're pretty much right down the middle.
Let's talk about that pork belly menu, though. You had mentioned it before when I met you, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize. It's not that hard. You mentioned it's pretty much make your menu though with pork belly, but is there anything particular that would have to be done, to make it right, to make it fuse right?
So we smoke our pork belly and then we chop it up into little cubes and then
Hmm.
we cook it for a while to really break it down and give it that softer feel, almost like a tripe, but
Hmm.
it's not as chewy as tripe. And to us, it's way more flavorful than
Yeah.
tripe. But
Hmm.
the rest of the soup, the broth is very traditional
Hmm.
with the cooking the peppers and blending the peppers and then cooking them again with different spices and things like that. And then we'll top it off with cabbage, cilantro, some Mexican oregano, and then a seared piece of pork belly on top.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that a lot of our listeners appreciate when we get different viewpoints on here. You mentioned a lot of people get maybe intimidated by what about this? Maybe I can make whether it's
Right.
pork belly menudo or brisket tacos or whatever. How do you avoid? I mean, or what would you say to people who want to try these things because they're always trying new things and maybe experimenting with this and being true to both the Tex-Mex culture and the barbecue culture?
Well, you mean like trying at the restaurant or trying it at home,
Oh,
doing
trying it at
something at
home.
home?
Trying it at home. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really, it's people feel so over intimidated. They won't. There's so much information
Yeah.
online now. I
Hmm.
mean, how they just came out with the Texas Monthly Top 50 barbecue joints. I
Hmm.
mean, how many of those guys got online over the last several years, and that's how they started looking at what everybody else is doing, and then
Yeah.
maybe experimenting with something. But the
Hmm.
only way you learn and get better and do things is you got to just follow a recipe, jump in there, do it yourself, and then over time you start to pick things up. I mean,
Hmm.
you realize, oh well, that didn't work, or you find something new on accident. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many things like that. It's just people are so intimidated by homemade tortillas,
Yeah.
and man, it doesn't get much easier than that. Now, there's some tips to the deal. There's some tips to doing it well, and how you're going to do it and when you're going to serve it and things like that. But man, it's what is it, 4 or 5 ingredients, and
Hmm.
mash it all together. But there's some things that are going to make the tortillas fluffier and different things like that. But really, people, if they just worked at that a few times, boy, they
Yeah.
could be impressing some people at their house pretty easily.
Hey, I'm sure you have some Mexican American or Hispanic influences in your life. I remember growing up, we had homemade tortillas literally every day. My mom would make. It was that easy for her. It was just like
Yeah.
automatic. So I hear you on that. Now you did say you put together the menus.
Mhm.
Where does the inspiration come for a particular menu? Are you laying in bed at night thinking, oh hey, how about this, or does just you let it come to you? How does it work?
Uh, now at this point, my brother takes over more of that. But when I was designing at the beginning, I remember I'd get off work and I would go to Starbucks Wi-Fi and drink coffee and sit
Hmm.
there and design a menu that my whole thing was to design a menu that had the barbecue element, the smoke and the meat,
Hmm.
the Tex-Mex element of tacos, nachos, bean bowls, and that it took a lot of prep work, which it does, and especially making everything from scratch. But I wanted to be able to do it well and then fast, like where at the point of they order it, it comes in, hey, give me a tortilla, we're cooking it. We've already got maybe some meat chopped up, or we're chopping some meat up, or slicing some chicken, or grabbing the pulled pork, chopping it up, throwing it in the taco, and then all our toppings are there. We're just adding toppings to different tacos and sending it out. So my thing to people when I started, I was like, I want to do it well and I want to do it fast, and get food out fast. So we do, and it's our setup, and it that part costs us a lot of money, the prep time and the time for all those ingredients. But when it's go time, man, we get a lot of food out fast. Yeah, and that's what we're designed to do.
What makes your menu stand out? And I'm not saying brag on yourself, but what do you feel makes a menu stand out when you get people, repeat customers, and you get, like you said, you're busting at the seams, et cetera? What are some of the elements?
I think the biggest thing is one of the biggest things we did, which has become huge, both for food cost and for just what people want, is we started using our brisket trimmings to grind up to make our smash burgers. Okay. And those have become extremely popular. I'd have never dreamed, having this restaurant. There was another barbecue guy came in from up in Dallas. I can't remember, but I think he was Texas top 50 a few years ago or something. But he goes, man, I could probably shut down and just be a hamburger joint at this point. He said, we sell so many hamburgers. And I said, man, we do too. And but I think our biggest thing is we've got a good selection: sandwiches, different tacos, nachos, and then a big part is everything's fresh. I mean, there was a time in the beginning, boy, that was hard. And my brother's going, gosh dang, why'd you put so many ingredients on each taco? And maybe we should try already bagged up diced tomatoes or already cooked potatoes. And we did. We had them send us some, and we tried them. We were like, they wanted to send us the dough balls already made, frozen. You just thaw them out, press them, but those have preservatives in them, and you could tell. And so it was hard in the beginning, but we stuck to it. Our processes got faster and better, and I think we're thankful that we did, or we wouldn't have the reputation now that we do. So I would say our quality of our food, that it's fresh, and then our consistency, because we're all there. We're all there every day. So.
Now, I want to say I saw something about butter tortillas that you guys do. Is that true? And what goes into that?
So that, butter, you can use any lard, any type of, you can use the manteca, the lard you get, just lard out of the thing. You can use, and a lot of these, you talk about fusion, some of these barbecue joints I've seen, and we tried it a little bit in the beginning, and we may do it again. And we use a lot of it for our barbacoa is the beef tallow. You can add beef tallow into those tortillas and get that smokiness in your tortillas. But yeah, there's several different, whatever fat you want to use. Butter just happens to be the fat that we like, because we like that flavor, that butter flavor with the tortillas. And so some people will use grease, some people use what other types of fat, but that's the fat we chose. That's the flavor we liked, and it's been pretty good so far for us. So.
All right. How do you guys do your briskets? Everybody always asks about that.
Yeah. So, we were just talking yesterday to somebody. We were interviewing a guy, and to maybe bring on and train, and we'll kind of tell them how we do our briskets. We thought we were really abnormal with the way we do it. But we found one of the blacks, Terry Blacks, or just the original Blacks, does it this way too. We found out watching a video. He was showing people. And this is really came because of our situation, our size, and us not wanting to be up all night, having somebody there all night doing it. But so we'll smoke them, season them, pretty much garlic, salt, pepper. It's been a bit since I've seen his rub.
Nothing too fancy, right? Yeah.
Nothing too fancy. We smoke over an offset smoker, 1,000-gallon smoker with oak and a little bit of mesquite, and post oak and a little bit of mesquite, and we'll say 160, but it's not always one. Sometimes it's 170, depending on how they feel, with nothing on them but the seasoning. And at that point, we wrap them in butcher paper, and believe it or not, we transfer them straight from there that afternoon to the walk-in cooler,
Okay.
and they will cool all the way down. And then the next morning, they're wrapped. You don't need any more smoke. He's taking them to an oven where he can control the heat more, and he puts them in the oven until they're probe tender or 195, somewhere in there, and then we pull them and we put them in a proofer.
Yeah.
And then that morning, as he's putting those in, he's starting another 8 briskets or whatever it is on the pit
For the next day, right?
just for the next day to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. Go ahead.
Well, there's so many different textures and things that get affected by how you do it. And so we were talking yesterday, when we expand, which we're working on expansion to add a much bigger pit room, a much bigger walk-in cooler, a place where we're cutting, a meat cutting room, multiple double stack ovens, where that could maybe change. We may tinker with changing it a little bit, but at this point too, I know none of us right now, nobody wants to stay all night watching brisket. So
yeah,
I don't know, how much it'll change, but it could with our expansion.
And the other interesting thing is barbacoa. Barbacoa is very polarizing for a lot of people. How are you guys doing your barbacoa?
So one thing I'd never liked barbacoa before, because a lot of places, whether I was on a job site and somebody comes up in an Astro van selling tacos, and I'm looking in there and it looks all dried out and old and been shredded for a while, and I was like, man, I just don't like food like that. And so, but we wanted to try it, and so we used the beef cheeks, and I can almost guarantee you there's a lot of Mexican food restaurants that just use some sort of chuck roast or something. Because beef cheeks are expensive and they're hard. You got to trim a lot of fat off unless you just want a real fatty barbacoa, which it's supposed to be kind of fatty.
Some people do. Yeah, some people do.
Yes, right. But we take it, we trim it real well, almost to where it's like in little pucks, the different size pucks of the meat. And he will smoke it for 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, somewhere around 3 to 4 hours. And then he takes it and he puts it in a, halfway covered in a bath pan of our beef tallow and onion and some other things. And then he will put that in an oven and braise that on real low overnight. So then when you grab it and you pull that beef cheek, it's real red, and it'll just pull apart. And it has the smoky flavor. And we had a guy come in Sunday, I think, from Houston, and a sheriff from Houston. And he goes, man, I've made barbacoa in the ground off the head. He said, I make my own barbacoa. And he said, this is the best barbacoa I've ever had in my life. And whatever that means. But I could tell you, I think it's fantastic. And we've had other people say it's fantastic. And so we only do that on the weekends. It may be something as we grow, we'll do more. But that's the way we do ours. We serve it with flour tortillas and some beans and go to town.
Man, that's kind of a modern day version of the old school way of doing it in the ground, the overnight.
Right.
And so that's how you kind of get a cheat code, so to speak.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I just there's so many things that people that you just can't do unless that's all you do. If you're making just barbacoa and you're doing it from the ground, but I mean, how much work is that? What do you got to charge for that? I mean, there's, people don't understand. You add something new to a menu, to a kitchen, and kitchen people are very structured with what they do. Front of the house,
it's all money. It's all money. You got to figure out the cost.
You got to figure out the cost, and then you got to talk your people into not freaking out because you're doing something new. The front of the house, they don't care. They're like, hey, whatever, cool, yeah, let's sell this, let's do that. Sure, we can do that. You get to the front of the house, and they're like, what are we doing? We can't do that. We already do. It's very structured in the back and very open in the front. So I don't.
The other thing I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned Tex-Mex, obviously South Texas origins and such, and you mentioned oak and mesquite, and the mesquite, speaking of polarizing, can be polarizing as well. A lot of people that we've had on here feel like it's too strong. Personally, when I'm doing a brisket, I'll put the mesquite on early and the oak on late. More oak than mesquite, because it's such a great flavor. Is that what kind of brings, if you want a true South Texas brisket or barbacoa or something?
Yeah, I've just always liked that flavor. And there's some people who've who've used a lot more mesquite than we do. We
Mhm.
we don't use a lot of mesquite. Mesquite burns very hot and very
Yeah.
fast,
Yeah.
and so there's money too that you got to think about. And so
Sure.
for us, it's more of just a little bit of a flavoring, while the oak really is the stay, the
Mhm.
keeps the fire going. But yeah, we just I've always liked that flavor, and that's just something that we've done, and think it gives it a little bit of a different flavor. So
And I know, like I said, we dig in because a lot of people are taking notes. They like to say, "Oh, I'm going to try this and do it my way or whatever." Did I see Pica Fritz on the menu? What
yeah.
what is that?
So being in Fredericksburg, I wanted something with a little bit of a German fusion.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
of course, in Spanish, pica means spicy. And
Hmm.
then the slang in German for a German is Fritz.
Hmm.
Here there's a baseball team called Fritztown Baseball, or a business called Fritztown Automotive. Um, and so that's called the spicy German. And so yeah, we'll take, and so right now we're using Opa's sausage out of Fredericksburg, a local sausage, and we
Hmm.
do a Opa's jalapeno sausage. Eventually, when we expand, we'll start making our own sausage.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, I think we talked a little bit about that. The who's
The
the guy?
sausage sensei.
The
The
sausage
sausage
sensei. Yeah,
sensei. He's in
yeah.
Australia right now. We've had him on the
Oh wow.
podcast, and I believe he might be a little north of you, kind of toward Austin or in Austin or something. Brilliant, brilliant. But you can take one of his classes and start really piddling with some of your sausages and such.
Yeah. No, my brother reached out to him about a year ago or more and said, "Hey, if we start doing our sausage, I'd love to." And he said the guy was super nice, which is like, "Sure, we'd
Great
love."
guy.
He said,
Yeah,
"I'll come out, or you come to me, or whatever you want to do."
yeah.
But yeah, eventually we'll make our own sausage. Right now we're using that Opa's, and so we'll chop up that Opa's, and we'll sear it on the griddle with fresh sauerkraut and
Hmm.
potatoes, and get that all seared together. We put that in a homemade tortilla, and then my brother, we make a Carolina Gold mustard-based barbecue sauce.
Hmm.
It goes on our pulled pork, and it goes on that taco. And really, it's amazing sauce that I would love to feature. You know what? We serve it with our barbacoa too on the side because it goes
Hmm.
really well with that. But we'll drizzle that over the potatoes, the sausage, and the sauerkraut, and then we top it with some pickled red onions on a homemade tortilla, and that's our German taco, our feature on Fredericksburg or whatever.
That's
But
hilarious.
it
That's
it
awesome.
it's good. It's honestly my favorite taco out of all of them. A lot of
Yeah.
people read quickly. That's another thing. Customers, they get a little intimidated looking at the menu because it's kind of foreign to them what we do. So
Hmm.
I'll go up and explain it. I said, here's our most traditional, our sandwiches. These are our tacos. This is what we do. And I'll tell them, read them all because there's some neat tacos in there. And I said,
Hmm.
this one's my favorite, but you got to like sauerkraut and stuff like that. But it's good.
Yeah. The Carolina Gold barbecue sauce, that is a little bit out of the norm for your part of the, well, actually for the state, but you're part of
Sure.
the state. Where did that come from?
So really, our pulled pork is where it started. We wanted to put it on our sauce, like Carolina style sauce, on our pulled pork sandwich.
Hmm.
So we'll drizzle that on our pulled pork and then top it with a tangy slaw.
Yeah.
Um, and then the sauce that my brother came up with was just, we had, in the first couple months of being open, we had two different people from the Carolinas, and I don't know if it's north or south because they all talk about their sauce is different in each one.
Hmm. Hmm.
But come from there, and they said, "Man, I'm from Carolina," and they said, "I've never had a sauce this good, the Carolina
Yeah.
style sauce this good." Again,
Hmm.
whatever that's worth, you may get somebody else that don't like it, but it's been a very popular sauce, which is where I kind of talked to you about bottling our sauces
Yeah. Yeah.
a little bit. That's the one that really everybody has said, I would buy this every day if you had it. So
That's
yeah, we
terrific.
made that. Yeah, it's a good sauce. It's a little bit different, but yeah, it was to put on our pulled pork, and then we put it on that taco, and now it goes with our barbacoa, and I'd really like to feature it in some more areas, but
Yeah.
it's
Well,
it's
there's always a
it's different.
chance.
It's foreign. Yeah, but you're right. It is a little bit foreign.
Hmm.
So
All right. So before we get you out of here, I do want to ask you just about the perfect Tex-Mex barbecue plate that our listeners and people who can piddle, sort of a couple things where they should maybe have an entry point if they want to kind of fuse these things, and what is your perfect Tex-Mex barbecue plate?
ooh, I would think the easiest place to start and branch out is brisket and a homemade tortilla.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever else you want to add for the people at home. They're and you don't have to have a homemade tortilla. Obviously, that's a lot to take on, smoking a brisket and then making homemade tortillas.
Oh,
But
come on, you can
hey,
do it.
yeah, yeah. Or run down and buy a HEB tortilla or a tortilla from somewhere. But to me, it's a tortilla and brisket, and then from there, we do a carnitas, which isn't traditional carnitas. It's really just our smoked pulled pork.
Mm-hmm.
But we put that in a homemade tortilla with some cabbage and cilantro, queso fresco. But I mean, the ultimate for me is the brisket, the tortilla, some charro beans, and then from there, maybe some Spanish rice. Um, uh, and really, because of how it's cooked, barbacoa to me is
Yeah.
very
Mm-hmm.
transferable between the two. It's it's barbecuing, and that's Mexican, as it gets. So to me, I like those. I really love our smoked pork belly menudo. I think that's a you put a little side of that for us. That's
Mm-hmm.
our perfect plate.
All right. So what's next for Leroy's? You mentioned expansion, but I'm guessing, you never know what to expect when you open a place, and you guys seem to really taking off. What's next for Leroy's?
Right now, we're working on expanding. Size wise, our building of both our dining area, our kitchen, our walk-in cooler, our prep area, all that stuff, our meat cutting room, which will also be a sausage making room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we're setting that up to really, and you never know, like you said, but we're kind of setting that up to, if something becomes available in downtown Fredericksburg, jump on that and do a more condensed menu and really get all those Main Street people that have never heard of us, that don't know about us out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of that just natural traffic rolling by and seeing us. And then we'll smoke everything, do a lot of our stuff out at the main restaurant, and then bring it in the mornings and do a little condensed menu there in town. And then we've had some offers in other towns from some other restaurateurs that have been in San Marcos for one. A guy in San Marcos has been in San Marcos for the restaurant for 15 years. And he's like, if you ever want to come here, man, I'll invest. He said, I don't want to open one because I've got one and I'm 60 years old. He said, but I would invest in y'all here. He said, I think that much of your food and your menu. So,
and then get Daniel Vaughn to stop by from Texas Monthly.
Texas, right? Yeah, exactly. Texas Monthly. I don't know that, until we do stuff by the pound, I don't know that we could ever be considered.
I don't know. I don't know. We had Daniel Vaughn on this podcast as well, and I think he went from little food trucks to the biggest of the big. And everything in between. Obviously, he went down to South Texas. Shout out to all the people who were in the top 10 and certainly made any acclaim there.
Fantastic.
So I think he, he's always looking. He said on this podcast, "Hey, if you hear of something, send it to me." So that's something that it might work. He might fit that in.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like I don't know that we could ever be a part of that at this point, but it's starting to fuse together more, like you said, and so maybe the top 50 will fuse together a little bit more. But the fact that we don't currently do anything by the pound, I don't know how that affects that, but I would love to have him out regardless, just to try a taco.
That's right. Try that.
Our brisket on a taco,
or the pork belly, or
one
of those
belly.
Things. Yeah. Did you know any of the guys that made it from your area?
So Eker was honorable mention. He was top 50 the time before. He's friends of mine. Great guy, great barbecue. He's got a little bit of a Korean fusion there. He does some ribs, some kimchi, some different things. Another honorable mention was Blackboard out in Sisterdale, which is probably 20 minutes away, and they do a really good job. And you talk about being out in the middle of nowhere, but still do the business because of their reputation. They do a good job. I've heard of a lot of the ones, but past like really knowing anybody personally, no.
Well, wasn't Burnt Bean from Seguin? Wasn't that the one? Yeah.
We went in there. Our Cisco reps took us in there. We had heard about them, but they took us in there and a year ago, and it was very good. And they're there all the time. That's his baby. They enjoy. You can tell he loves what he does, and he does a lot of he got a Michelin star,
Yeah.
because he does a lot of fusion. Like he takes that barbecue and does some really cool Tex-Mex stuff with it and some different things with it. He's one of the ones that's a lot more Tex-Mex than you would think.
Yeah.
But he does, everything by the pound too. And but he does a great job. And then recently I went into the number 2, which was Leroy and Lewis in Austin. And they had a line. I didn't really feel like waiting. I was just kind of checking it out. And I had one of their smash burgers and it was good. But they got a Michelin star. And so they seem to do a good job. And they don't just do barbecue by the pound. They do some fusion stuff too, some beef cheeks. They do their beef cheeks like brisket, where you slice it, where it's cooked, smoked like brisket. They don't braise it or anything like that. And it's sliced like a brisket. And, but yeah, I think there's so many good barbecue joints because there's so much good information out there that people are starting to branch out into different fusion stuff, trying different things.
I think, and I've talked about this with multiple people here, the fact that the world is so much smaller. And you mentioned Korea, obviously Tex-Mex. We've had some Indian barbecue. I've seen all kinds of different things. I mean, that's why I feel like I love doing this podcast, but the influences come from everywhere, and you never know, So
yes. No, I think a huge key for all these flavors that and all these other fusions from these other whatever Indian or Korean cultures, but I think the one thing key is the smoke. I think the smoky meats, adding it to different cultures or their flavors or their food is a big deal. I think for people around here, for us, adding those smoky meats to Mexican food is something a lot of people have never had. And I think I think that's allowed us to be different from everybody else.
Well, man, I really appreciate you joining us. It's been a lot of fun. We got to get down there. I'm going to be down. Where we're going to be? We're going to be in Dripping Springs. Maybe we'll pop down to Fredericksburg at some point.
You're not far from me.
Here in the next couple of, actually in July, we're going to be down there. So I'll be sure to pop by. Appreciate you joining us. Website, I'm guessing, is Leroy's Tex-Mex
Barbecue.com. Yes, sir.
Barbecue.com. All right,
yes,
man. Well, appreciate you joining us, and appreciate everybody joining us here on the podcast every week. As always, brought to you by Texas Star Grill Shop and TexasStarGrillShop.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and smoke it up. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, man.